Hey guys, what's up? It's Magnet. I am back for just a quick video. I found myself without much to do, so I decided we just put something together quick and dirty. I know I said I wouldn't be doing a lot of regular videos anymore, and for the most part that's kind of still true, but I'm going to start doing videos that are just quick and dirty. We'll talk about different things. I won't go to such elaborate lengths to find replays and stuff to show you guys what's going on. But still, it should be fairly interesting and hopefully somewhat educational. So, the things that I was going to do in PvP were gateway attacks, late game, Phoenix Wars, and harassment. So I've just opened up a test map here, so let's just go ahead and kind of talk about it. So the first thing we were going to talk about was gateway attacks. And a lot of the times with these gateway attacks, they will start out looking kind of like this. And it's your job to figure out how to hold these things, and we're going to kind of talk about that a little bit, but simulate a lot of it, of course. So let's say you're this is the opponent, this is the guy that's attacking you, and this is you. Maybe you have a couple of units up here. What they're going to want to do is they're going to want to kind of bull rush up your ramp, and they want to put a pylon on the high ground so they have as close of reinforcements as possible. And we're going to talk about different ways that you can hold that. So they'll be coming up here, and they'll be attacking you, and this probe will try to just get a pylon down. And a lot of times, you might not have enough units out here. Maybe you have a mothership core or something. If you do have enough units out here, like say 2 or 3 stalkers, you can see that even without microing this, it's really easy for me to push this away. So that's one of the good ways to deal with it, is just to have some stalkers here. And that'll usually kill the first couple of units, but after that, you might want to be careful, because they can start to warp in here. So this is the next part. They'll start warping in up here with, 3 or 4 units at a time. So let's say in this case, it's 4. And their units will start to grow to pretty big numbers. The best thing to do with this is to find some tech that's going to answer it. And more importantly, your mothership core is going to hold off a lot of these attacks, because you can just overcharge your Nexus. It'll buy you about a minute for you to get the tech up that you need. So the techs that you can get are your own gateways. You can match their gateway count and just try to out-micro them, like we talked about in the gateway attacks video, or rather gateway versus gateway micro video. Another thing you can do is, if they haven't advanced up your ramp, you can just go ahead and grab one sentry, and there's a lot you can do with this one sentry and just kind of chop them up as they come across the map, or rather up the ramp. So let me just go ahead and kill this pylon really fast just to demonstrate that. I want these guys on the high ground. And we're just pretending that this area is the base, by the way. So I could even just bring a probe up here just to signify that there's a base. So let's say they're coming up now, and for some reason they didn't get a pylon on the high ground, you denied it, something like that, but they still have a lot of units down here. You can, with your sentry on the high ground here, just kind of chop up a couple of units and just kill them for free. So let's say he just attacks up here. All you have to do is just place one force field and just try to grab a couple of them, and I know I messed up there, but you can also do this and just try to push them out as well. But you want to be careful, and let's just simulate, assuming I had landed that force field properly. Maybe I grabbed these 3 units. You can easily deal with these 3 because the rest of the units on the low ground can't fight at all. So you'll be kind of up here, you'll be fighting them. I'm just holding position for the sake of it. And the rest of them will be down here at the bottom, stuck behind a force field, and they won't be able to get up. So sentries are really good if you can cut them up coming up the map. But if you can't get that far, let's talk about a couple of other techs. Let's say you open DT. DT's build should be fast enough to get the DTs out in time. Whoops, I have the wrong gateway selected, and I just warped in the wrong units. So DT builds should have DTs out in time to put them back at your own base and make it hard for them to continue to advance up here, because they won't have detection if they're attacking you this fast, at least more than likely. So you can do things like 1 DT in the main and 1 DT at their base to try and punish their lack of detection, or you can just do your 2 DTs back here, and that will deal with a lot of gateway openers, because they really can't do a whole lot about it. So let's talk about one more quick method, and then we'll move on to something else. One other quick method you can talk about is if you open with a Stargate, you can go for a really fast Oracle. And what this is going to do is they're going to be interested in warping all their stuff forward here. So you could even keep an eye on their pylon, and if their pylon, you won't have these, by the way. If their pylon is warping in back near your base, you can just send your Oracle in, and if they don't have any units back at home, then your Oracle can kill basically everything. Where did that go? Oh, there it is. So, yeah, if they're all out here on the map and whatnot, and let's say this is their base back here, you can very easily just take your Oracle, turn on the overcharge here, fly it in, Worst case scenario, you're going to force them to warp in back at home and you might not get too many kills. But at the same time, they're going to have to walk those units all the way across the map. And that's 3 or 4 less units you're going to have to deal with. And then after that, you can start producing Void Rays here and get overcharges and kind of play defensively and eventually push it off that way. So that's kind of a basic overview as far as holding gateway attacks. Let me check back on my screen here. Oh, next we want to talk about late game. So late game's a little weird. I know I didn't talk about Tempest too much, and we're going to talk about that now. So let's say that this is the opponent. We're going to go with the opponent being red. Let's say your opponent has a lot of Colossus, and you didn't decide to go for Colossus for whatever reason. Let's say you decided to go for something like Immortals. So their army might look something like a lot of Colossus, some Zealots, maybe Charge. And by this stage of the game, the ideal scenario is once you figure out that they're going for Colossus, if you can ever match their Colossus count with Tempest, then I'll show you some interesting things you can do with this. We'll produce a few Immortals, maybe a few Zealots or something, maybe another Tempest. I know we talked about this a little bit in the unit micro video, so you can go back and watch that as well if you want to, but this is going to be kind of the beginning of the late game PvP stages. We're going to talk a little bit about having to deal with these types of armies. So what's going to happen is, let's say you're kind of out here forward on the map, and this is where you want to be. You don't want to sit back at your base. What you want to do is you want to keep your Tempest as forward as possible and run your army away for as long as possible. So let's say they attack forward here. What you want to do is you want to move your ground army back so that the Colossus can't do anything. And then you want to kind of trade your Tempest out as much as possible. They might walk their Colossus away, and in that case you can bring your units back forward. But if you can ever trade out all of their Colossus, and your Tempest can either die or even stay alive, then if you're left over with this type of army composition, say Immortal, Zealot, or Archon or something like that, then cleanup should be really, really easy. So we didn't talk a lot about Tempest, but that's their general usage. But once the game starts to get super late, you start to get into these circular counters of which Stargate units counter which. I'm going to kill these units, by the way, just to give them something to do and we'll relieve some army supply. So in the late game, there's kind of a circular army counter here off of Stargate production. Once the game goes that long, you're going to start getting into things like that. So for the most part, Void Rays are the counter to Tempests. Tempests are the counter to Carriers, and Carriers are the counter to Void Rays. So you kind of want to keep up on what your opponent is doing and kind of base your Stargate production off of what they're doing. And I say this because eventually these Stargate units, if you have good enough upgrades, Carriers and Void Rays and whatnot will annihilate any ground-based army, which kind of forces them to go for Stargate units of their own. So let's say this is your type of army composition, Tempest, Void Ray, which is pretty good, but they do nothing but mass Carriers. Since you have... Oh, wow. They didn't change the build time on this. Lol. They're supposed to all build instantly, but it still takes forever. So, that's a funny joke. Okay, so let's just pretend that they have a lot of Carriers. And if you have a lot of Void Rays, the Carriers are going to rip them up really fast. So you kind of just need to send in Hallucination Scouts, kind of figure out what they're doing as far as their late game tech. I'm just clicking all kinds of random buttons here, but... so yeah, just send in hallucinations every once in a while. Maybe you could drop Revelations on an Oracle just to know what's going on. But know that this is really only like a 3 or a 4 base type of transition. You can't really do Stargate on 2 bases. You'll die really often to things like Storm timings, Blink Stalker timings, Archon timings, stuff like that. It's just really hard to get rolling, and you can really only do it after you've won a fight on your side of the map, or when you're on about 4 bases and you can put out Carriers and Tempests and stuff about 4 at a time. For the most part, you kind of do want to start out with Carriers because they're going to handle most, or I guess you should say, you want to start out with a handful of Void Rays, maybe 6 Void Rays, and then you want to start transitioning into Carriers. And you really want to do that on at least 3 Stargates, and again, at least 3 or 4 bases, or after you've won a fight on your side of the map. And eventually, if they keep staying on gateway units, and you can keep up on your air upgrades over here, maybe on your shield upgrades, then the Carriers will kill everything on the ground. It doesn't really matter what kind of ground army they have, which might prompt them into Tempest, to which you need to counter with Void Rays, and then you start to get into that weird circular type of game. So, just wanted to provide a really quick overview of late game PvP. So, let's check our screen here. Okay, next we're going to talk about Phoenix Wars, and this is a crazy one. Let me kill off my units really fast. Oh, I don't want to kill my cybernetics score, or whatever. So they're all going to kill each other. Let's have these guys all kill each other as well, and the cannon will finish them off. So let's say you open Stargate, and we talked about this a little bit with Stargate openers, but we're going to talk about a little bit more later in the game and how much of a huge difference just a few Phoenix make. So if you're in this type of situation where you get into Phoenix Wars, you typically either need to try to have the bigger Phoenix count, or you need to switch immediately and attack really early. So let's say you are blue and you only have maybe 10 or 11 Phoenix versus his 14 or so. Let's check these numbers really quick. That's 8, 9, 10, 11. And this is 12, so 13, 14. You may think, okay, only 3 Phoenix, that's not that big of a deal. But we need to really stress how big of a deal this actually is. And then we're going to tell you, or rather change it up to say that if you're ever behind in Phoenix versus Phoenix, you have to switch, or you're probably just dead. This is a very unforgiving circumstance. So let's go with the Phoenix versus Phoenix battle just to demonstrate how fast these stack. And again, this is 14 Phoenix versus about 11. So I'm just going to attack both of these armies together. And this isn't normally what would happen, but let's just say that it did, just to demonstrate how hard the Phoenix count leader wins this type of fight. So you can see it's very quickly spiraling out of control. And look how many are still left over on this side. There's going to be at least 7 left over. And yeah, there's 8 left over, even though the discrepancy was only 3. So it changes really fast. What you really want to do against this type of thing is you want to go for like a 2-base, huge Blink Stalker all-in, and try to mitigate probe losses as much as you possibly can. So the idea here is if they're still making a lot of Phoenix and you just stop doing it, you're going to get into a situation where you probably have a Stalker count that's similar to this. They'll have a Phoenix count that's maybe a little bit more than that, and they're going to be pretty desperate to lift up your Stalkers as fast as they can, but over time it really should stop working. And also you need to remember that you do need to get an attack upgrade, at least 1, to make this a little bit stronger. So if we just attack these now, and we see how this goes, yeah, they can try and lift your Stalkers and it might be annoying, but for the most part, they will eventually run out of energy, and your Stalkers, you still can micro them back just a little bit, as you can see me just grabbing each individual Stalker and kind of blinking them back. So this is really the type of thing that you want to do, is you want to transition like immediately if you get behind in the Phoenix versus Phoenix game. Let's talk a little bit about if it's an even game really quickly, and let's make sure all these Phoenix are dead. So let's say both of you guys get to about maybe 25 Phoenix, and it sounds insane, but it does happen. You need to wonder, what's the next step that I need to do? First of all, you need to be sure that you are ahead in the range game. So this is Phoenix range. Attack upgrades actually don't matter all that much until probably +2. So I'd say actually +1 shields is a little bit better investment over time, just because it'll help buffer those first few Phoenix volleys, or you can go for, +1 air armor. And the reasoning here is because a Phoenix has 2 attacks, and it's going to nullify a lot of the damage that's going to go on between these fights. So these Phoenix have +1 shields, and they have range, which means that they'll win pretty much everything. And even, we'll do an equal Phoenix count here, and I'll just kind of attack one, and I'll micro the other, and just keep it just barely out of range, and show you how easy it is to win these types of fights. This will be pretty hard, because it's usually 2 people microing their genitalia off, but let me try to get these things working so I can demonstrate how big of a difference it is if you have range and you have +1 shields. We'll keep these Stalkers out of here because those won't be in the game in this type of situation. So yeah, the first thing you want to do is you really want to get Phoenix range, and I'll show you why, because you can keep them out of range for the most part. You'll notice that all of my Phoenix, all the red Phoenix are firing and all the blue Phoenix are not. So you can pick off a lot of Phoenix that way. And even in just a straight up fight, because you have the +1 shields and range, you will win those really heavily. But again, let's pretend that we didn't get to this situation. Let me kill off a bunch of these Stalkers here. So both of you guys have a huge Phoenix count. You ideally want to expand really, really fast. A 3rd base at like 10 or 11 minutes in Phoenix versus Phoenix is okay. You just reinforce with a lot of cannons just in case they try to switch into Stalkers, because cannons are going to be your best mineral and DPS investment at that point. And eventually, once again, you want to start getting into carriers once it's kind of a Phoenix stalemate type of game. So you just take bases really aggressively, and if you can get the lead in carriers, the carriers will rip apart these Phoenix, and there's not a whole lot that they're going to be able to respond with very well. If they try to go for Tempest, the Phoenix can focus them down really, really fast. So that's typically the later game transitions you want to go for. Anything else like High Templar or Storm doesn't typically work against Mass Phoenix, so those are the more of the late game type of things that you want to think about once you get to that point in the Phoenix versus Phoenix battles. So let me check my last thing here. Harassment. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about different things that you can do, and especially different type of attacks that you can do to try and get an advantage with harassment. We've already talked a lot about Phoenix harassment and DT harassment and all that kind of good stuff. We're going to talk about more like planned, sort of really annoying harassment. So let's say this is the opponent. Let's just pretend this is their mineral line, so they're mining right here. Maybe they have a cannon down, and maybe their army is like somewhere over here, right? We'll just do that to represent their army. Let me kill these stalkers off really fast. And the DTs. So let's say you have that. Let's say you both have fairly equal armies. But you can put out a warp prism, and you can be really annoying with this warp prism in a couple of different ways. And do we still have our mothership core? I don't think we do. So we might have to wait for that to gain some energy. I probably should have planned this out a little bit better, but like I said, it's going to be a little bit quick and dirty. So let's say this is the opponent's army, right? And let's say this is their third base. I know it's a Terran base, but let's just pretend it's a Protoss third base. They're going to be out here trying to protect their third base, and their main mineral line is what I'm talking about, and all their production is back here. So what you can do is you can bring a lot of your units forward and kind of punish them for not being in two places at once. So let's say you start to move over here, and you start to kind of get ready to attack his third base, but at the same time you move a warp prism in. Let me hotkey my gateways again. Say you move a warp prism in, you go into phasing mode here, not in the mineral line, but somewhere nearby. You warp in a whole bunch of zealots, maybe 8 or so, and then you go and attack his base, or attack his cannon. So the zealots will be in there, maybe he warps in, maybe he doesn't. A lot of times this is going to cause him to walk back. And then what you can do is you can start to move in here, and you can target his third base down, assuming it got to this point. And let's say he realizes what's going on. He's probably going to have a bigger army. We'll pull these guys back. Probably going to have a bigger army than you, so you can try to focus him down with your immortals as fast as possible. And as soon as he reports, you can just recall and come right back home, and you got a base for free. You might get 2 bases for free if he really messes up. So planning out a little bit of harassment timings is really good. And keeping a warp prism out pretty much at all times and keeping an eye on where his army is also a really good tactic. Because let's say, again, this is his army and he says, oh, I'm going to go attack him now. As soon as he does that, you can just come right back in here. You can drop off your zealots. You can put your warp prism into phasing mode. You can warp in to your heart's content. And if he stays out on the map and he can't reinforce over your harassment here, then you put any attack that he has on the clock, or rather on a clock. You can play defensively and you can try to pick apart this army in various different ways. So planning little harassment moves like this is really, really good as far as different things you can do. Let's talk about a little bit more rare of a harassment. And this is, say, you opened Oracle, and then you opened with a handful of Phoenix. Something you can do is if, say, they are back here. Actually, this is fairly unclear. Let me switch this up. I always want the red player to be the enemy. So let's say the red player is back here. And I killed their I killed their cybernetics core. Whoops. Okay, well let's just pretend that these cannons are stalkers, alright? But they're not stalkers, but rebuilding the cybernetics core is going to take way too long. Let's say this is their mineral line. They know you open Stargate, so they're putting stalkers and stuff back there. So you open up with an oracle, and you go in there, and maybe your oracle doesn't do too much. So your follow-up... Oh god, this is not going to work. Here, let's pretend these are stalkers. Let's pretend these are stalkers, okay? They're back at the other enemy base here. You come in and harass, but your oracle's going to eventually get pushed away, but you still want to try and do some harassment. So what you can do is you can pair up your phoenixes with your oracles, and you can just fly them in with the oracle and lift all the stalkers while your oracle goes to work. So you turn on the oracle, come in here, make sure you're tabbed into the right thing. You can just lift up the stalkers, and then the oracle kind of has free reign here for a little while until these phoenix lifts expire. So those are some cool stuff that you can do later on with Stargate builds. Let's talk about one more, and this is going to be Warp Prism Harass with an Immortal, or rather with 2 Immortals. And I'm going to show you the reasoning why this is good as well. And geez, I should have really just built the cybernetics core and just waited, but we can see it's going to take a long time. So once again, let's just pretend that these are stalkers. I wish there was another unit that could represent this, but actually, screw this. Let's just pretend that we're red now, okay? And we're fighting blue. So let me get out a warp prism here. And this is going to be an immortal harass. And the whole idea here is just to keep your warp prism alive, but you can also fight different components of their army. Whoa, I don't want to fly into that. So let's say you come in here with your immortals. The stalkers are all back here. Their army is somewhere else on the map. What you can do is you can start to drop immortals kind of by their mineral line. And a lot of times you can kill probes with this, because you can see if we move an immortal out somewhere over here, or rather a probe, these will kill the probes in one hit. So immortal harasses can be really strong, and if they only send a few stalkers to try and clean it up, maybe they start to target down your warp prism or something, but you can, these immortals are really strong as far as killing this, and you can kind of phase your immortals back in here as they start to lose their shields. So there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with warp prism harass with immortals is loaded into them as well. To a lesser extent, you can do things like storm drops, even though those are super rare. But they are available, and if you can make it work, then more power to you. I didn't comment on them too much because they're just barely starting to get more and more popular, but yeah, that's pretty much everything that I didn't cover in PvP. So just for a quick video, and I might do more of these in the future, maybe once a week I might try and get a video out or something, but it definitely won't be as frequent as I was doing before. But yeah, I'll do a series of videos that's basically what I left out of each matchup, because I did have a whole bunch of videos planned for that, but I just kind of ran out of time. So yeah. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this. I guess I may be back soon with more stuff. I'll just release it as I have time, and as soon as I can just sit down and spend about 20 or 30 minutes just talking about StarCraft. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll see you later.